This is Queasy Crayfish, and I'm here today with Mars Vindicator, and this is sort of a impromptu discussion about Sega based off of something I said in another video that we were just doing. Yeah. Basically, the point that I was making is that when you look at Sega and you look at all of their major franchises, with the exception of Sonic, actually, the trend that you see across all of them is sort of that they are not character or story based. They are completely concept based, and of course, to varying degrees. But and I think that really kept them from being competitive with the other companies, because when you look at all of the most successful franchises throughout history, with the exception of, I guess I should say, like, modern history, because when you look at, Pac-Man and Pong and stuff like that, it doesn't really apply as much. But when you look at the modern history of games, all of the most successful franchises are very much story or character based. They're based around these kind of familiar issues and images and ideas that keep reappearing throughout the series. Like when you look at any of the Nintendo franchises, it's all Mario versus Bowser and the princess and all that stuff, and Link versus Ganon and Hyrule and the Master Sword and all of these familiar images, Samus and Metroids and all that stuff. And Star Fox. I think Star Fox is an important one to mention, because I'll be getting into Panzer Dragoon in a little bit. But Star Fox, you're playing as this character, and he has this fleet of friends with him, and all the banter that goes back and forth between them. And even outside of Nintendo, you look at Metal Gear Solid. It's all about Snake and Liquid Snake and Otacon and Revolver Ocelot and the Patriots and conspiracies, and kind of this mixture of fiction and true history and everything. And Japanese, anime mixed with American action movies and secret agent movies and stuff like that. That's kind of the whole thing with Metal Gear Solid. Even something like Final Fantasy, where it's like you're changing the story and you're changing the characters every single time out. You still get Chocobos and Phoenix Downs, and you still get these kind of like recurring characters, even if they are very different sometimes. And you still have the whole concept of, I guess I shouldn't say concept, because that's kind of what I'm arguing against here, but this whole idea of having your party with you and exploring all these different towns and stuff like that. Whereas and when they break from that that core, when you have something like Final Fantasy 13 that does it completely different and goes in this completely different direction, you get this huge uproar of why you're messing up Final Fantasy. When you look at Metal Gear Solid 5, where it dials back the story elements so much, you get people dissatisfied with it. And so taking all of that into account, and then looking at Sega's franchises, you see they're all, just with the exception of Sonic, which Sonic does well, having these characters, having these kind of core dynamics of Sonic and his friends fighting against Robotnik and all that stuff. The other franchises, even the ones that we really love, Streets of Rage, like, I couldn't tell you much of anything about any of the characters. I don't know anything about Blaze or Skate or their backstories or anything, or even like you probably would, so I hesitate to say this, but I don't know like the main antagonist. I don't know like what the core conflict is in those games. Really, I just know it's about walking down the street and fighting people, and that's kind of it's just the plot. It has a plot, but it's just kind of like a thing to hang this concept on, And Panzer Dragoon is definitely like that. Panzer Dragoon, I have played through Panzer Dragoon 2 like 2 or 3 times now. I don't know the main character's name. I don't know who the main boss is. I don't know what the world is even called that the game exists in. I don't know the story. I don't know anything about it. I just know you fly on a dragon and you shoot stuff that as it's flying at you. It's just a concept game. And it extends to Virtua Fighter. Like you look at Virtua Fighter versus something like Tekken or Mortal Kombat, where all of the characters in those franchises have all these unique backstories, and they have Sub-Zero and Scorpion and Raiden and all this stuff, and Tekken it's Jin and Kazuya and all these characters, Heihachi, like they all have this like weight to them, and they all have this uniqueness and the way they interact with each other and everything. Whereas the Virtua Fighter characters are just like, martial arts guy, drunken master guy, ninja guy, like they're just these archetypes. They're kind of devoid of substance. And I'm not saying that there is no backstory whatsoever. I'm sure there are people that are Virtua Fighter buffs that can say, well, yeah, I know all this stuff about Akira and Pai and Shun-Di and all, and, I read all the manuals and I know all their backstory and their blood types, and of course that exists, but it's not. Sega never did anything to like. How should I put it? I mean, it's just not a. They don't popularize that element of their franchises. It's all just like play the game. Like there's no greater sense of franchise or greater sense of having all of these collective images and stories and stuff that carry along with that franchise, and Shinobi, you walk left to right and you kill people, like you were saying in a conversation we had a long time ago where Joe Musashi, he's just a ninja. He doesn't. You can't compare him to a character like Link, who has this kind of like timeless struggle and everything, and can appear in all these different art styles and all these different forms and everything. Like Joe Musashi he's just got to be a ninja who kills people, and so that's basically the point that I was trying to make. And so you look at something like Panzer Dragoon, which is like a mystery to me. I don't know anything about the franchise or the story, and compare it to something like Star Fox. Star Fox is a inferior game to me, Star Fox 64 to Panzer Dragoon 2, as far as just mechanics is concerned. Like Panzer Dragoon 2 is just way more polished and looks better and sounds better and everything, but it doesn't compete because it doesn't have any kind of story or characters to latch onto. Like it's just like this empty kind of shell of a game in that regard. And when you look at that series and the way they tried to, in the next game, Panzer Dragoon Saga, actually expand on they expand on their concept and bring in all these RPG elements and tell a broader story. Sega just, nixed the whole thing by not supporting it, whatsoever, and putting out these extremely limited number of copies, and so this is just what Sega does, like they don't seem to understand having franchises that are greater than just the individual games themselves contained within them. So after my 10-minute rant there, I guess I'll turn it over to you.
Well, okay. See, now there were a couple of things that I like kind of agreed with and then disagreed with, and then went back and forth on. But it is all kind of starting to make sense. So like, okay. So first, going into this, one of the things that I was actually going to say was that you mentioned that like that Sonic was like one of the basically the only franchise where they do make it bigger. And I was going to argue actually that Streets of Rage, Shinobi, and Golden Axe were a bit bigger. And there were a couple reasons why. I will definitely acknowledge my bias here. And so obviously I've played those games a lot more. So like there's just a heightened chance that I personally know it a lot more. So I do definitely recognize the bias. But kind of where I was going with those games was that like, number one, unlike a lot of other Genesis games, all three of those games have like notable sequels, and like kind of to the extent that like like you have to, like, in order to like know the franchise, you must play all three of the games, whereas like I get, not to say that Panzer Dragoon isn't like that, it doesn't have sequels, but it's just it's just not like as big of a thing, I feel like, in comparison to like some of those games. Or even if you look at something like you know, like for instance, like I don't think it's like, oh my god, if you play Virtual Cop, you gotta play Virtual Cop 2. You know, like those games they're just kind of like dependent on like that light gun fun. You know what I mean? There's no like real big whole thing there. But even bigger than that, I feel like what kind of made me think that was not so much because of Sega actually making those games bigger. I think actually a lot of the Genesis games in general just felt a bit better because okay, so number one, you kind of had like the advantage of it only being like 2D. So it was almost kind of like you kind of were cool with it not going as far because like some things you just couldn't go as far with, you know, because it was old graphics, old games. And you probably, you know, I think we were a bit dependent more back then on making the world in our own minds than once we got like something like on a PS2, you know, because we kind of had to. On top of that, I think that those games as well depend heavily, like the music scores of those games are very, very heavily intertwined with like the games themselves. Mm-hmm. And I mean, this goes for me, and I think this goes for like some of the other like Sega fan community where like those soundtracks are like really big, you know, and those soundtracks, you know, it's kind of like if you were playing those games on mute, it just no, you know, like it just it doesn't work. Like so I kind of almost think that Sega did it accidentally. And then on top of that too, I think another thing that makes it even better, which also helps Sonic as well, is the fact that the Genesis very much so had a huge presence and a very unique thing going on with the whole, like basically it was cool as shit. Like this was the cool system. You know what I'm saying? Like the system is black, it's sleek. You know what I mean? Like, you got like the color scheme of like black and red versus like NES with like beige and purple. You know what I mean? Like it's just like the shit was just cool as hell. Their whole marketing scheme was like, we're cooler than Nintendo. You know, like they came out with those you know, like they had like the Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog, but then they also had the Saturday AM show, which was like edgy, cool. You know what I mean? Like it just
plus so multiple comics, you know.
Exactly, all the comics. And then those franchises too, like ninjas, you know what I'm saying? Like, you know, big burly white dudes beating up people in the street like Rambo or whatever, like Streets of Rage, you know, like that stuff, like, you know, Fabio and like Golden Axe, you know what I mean? Like that shit just like it was just what was there at the time. So I think that those franchises are just kind of are carried by their era, and then that helps to make them feel more fleshed out. But actually, they're probably no different than many other Sega franchises. Now, where we really start to see this Sega stuff go really bad, I think, is especially with the Saturn and especially with the Dreamcast, because so right off the gate, those systems, Sega tried to make a good presence for those systems, but it just didn't really match. You know, because like the Genesis, you could sum it up in one word: cool, right? Like that's it,
right?
Boom. Right. But like, what could you say about the Saturn? You know, like, what could you say about the Dreamcast? You know, like those, you can't sum those up in like one word.
Not
you know,
all.
Like Genesis really hit that. So then when I start to look at those games and the games that were on those systems, all that stuff becomes very, very much so apparent to me. And I think a lot of it had to do with the way Sega was as a company. And I think that maybe this may be what sets apart other similar companies like them, because we always compare Sega to Nintendo, but we forget that like really their only similarity was that they both have consoles. When it comes to like them making games and the way they go about the way they make games and the kind of games they make, they're actually not that similar. Sega is actually a bit more similar. They have like almost as many similarities to them as they do to like Capcom, if you ask me, or even like Konami, you know, these like historied and arcade game developing Japanese companies, right? Mm-hmm. So I think Capcom and Konami may have realized some of these flaws early on and did their best to like fix them. But Sega, I think, did not do this. So like, take for example, both Konami and Sega are very popular for making arguably the two biggest fighting game franchises. You got to throw Mortal Kombat in there, I guess. But, you know, as history goes on, you know, everybody knows Street Fighter and Virtua Fighter. Definitely more so Street Fighter. But Street Fighter has a very well and established world. And even back then, I think something as simple as them making Ryu and Ken, while it's like probably more so, it was more so like of a technological palace swap kind of like thing. I think actually Ryu and Ken were probably one of the best things to happen to Street Fighter, and kind of the same way that Mortal Kombat did it with their ninja characters.
Right.
Because what it does is you create these two characters who are basically are kind of almost the same, but then they have these slight differences in the way that they play. So if you even begin to just know a little bit about them, you immediately do your best to try to differentiate them instead of making them similar. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So that adds depth into the world. You know, why is Ryu different from Ken? Well, one is white, one is Japanese. Well, I should say American, one is Japanese. One has blonde hair, one has dark hair. One is a rich boy, playboy. The other one is like, you know, a super historied martial artist, you know, that just like has no money and just goes around and fights people. You know, they got trained by the same person. So like, it's kind of like, how could these two characters, some rich white American playboy and some like country bumpkin Japanese dude, how did they end up being trained by the same guy, and why did they fight the same? You know what I mean? So like immediately, like take away all the other characters from the series, you already had this kind of interesting thing going on, you know? Take something like Virtua Fighter. Yeah, like you said, all of those characters are just like, you know, flexible Chinese girl, you know, old angry Chinese dude, you know what I'm saying? White wrestler dude, like big black motherfucker, you know what I'm saying? Like they're just, I mean, like the guy's name is Jeffrey McWild, you know what I'm saying? And when he wins, he says, "I win!" Like he's just a big black motherfucker, you know what I'm saying? Like literally, like they were in the studio, like, okay, we need another archetype. Oh, a big black motherfucker, you know what I'm saying? Like, like that's literally how it happened. You know what I'm saying? Ninja, you know what I mean? Like karate dude, you know, white girl, you know, and it's like, yeah, Jackie and Sarah are siblings, and Pai and Lau are, you know, father and daughter, but like siblings are already different, you know what I'm saying? Like fathers and daughters are already different, but like the thing with Ryu and Ken was like, yeah, like they're not related. So like, why are they similar? Like they're not even of the same nationality or ethnicity. Like, why are they similar? You know what I mean? So that really, so Capcom, I think, really tried to like get into character development like at the start, and really tried to like flesh out these worlds, you know, and then it shows up in their other franchises like Resident Evil, like Mega Man, you know what I mean? And they did a great job with, because like Resident Evil, like that is not an arcade game, you know what I mean? Like you can't play Resident Evil in the arcade, like it just doesn't work. So like even at the beginning of the 32-bit era, at the onset, they were trying to make these at-home fleshed out experiences. Sega, on the other hand, was still making shells of games. Like look at Knights. Like they probably just wanted to make a game where you fly around. So they put like a kind of cool character, like we want to fly around in dreams. So like they just made some dream looking jester shit and just had you fly around. Now don't get me wrong, I love Knights, but yeah, like is not really fleshed out. It's just like this crazy, it looks cool as hell. It's just this crazy dream world, you know what I'm saying? You just fly around like Burning Rangers, you know what I'm saying? Like Virtua Cop, like it's just like cops, you know what I'm saying? It's like these like slightly futuristic cops. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like they're just cops, you know what I'm saying? Like Fighting Vipers, they were like, all right, we got like martial artists fighting, let's make like badass kids fighting. And then you got Fighting Vipers, you know what I'm saying? Like, what are all the badass kid archetypes, you know what I'm saying?
Skateboarder,
like white skateboard guy, you know, rebellious black rollerblader girl, you know what I'm saying? Like, yeah, like all their games are just filled with like archetypes, and they're like they never really get fleshed out, and boom, like that's it. And I think a lot of that came from, and so okay, I'll cut Sega some slack because, well, in one regard, because yeah, like when you're making arcade games, what you're focused on, you're focused on getting money, you're focused on, you know, putting a bunch of lights and lasers and music and crazy stuff in front of somebody, and then making that stuff, you know, tempt them to spend money. You know what I'm saying? So I'll fight anybody over this. Like, the Konami Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle beat 'em ups, uncomparable, not even close, not even in the same conversation as something like Streets of Rage, right?
Right.
And the pure reason why is because those games were made for the arcade specifically. Like Sega actually did a little bit of work with Streets of Rage and making it a bit more of a fleshed out combat style because it was an at-home game. Like though, like when I look like Hyperstone Heist, Turtles in Time, like I'll play them, you know what I'm saying? But like
those
it's
games
button
are just
mashing.
cool. Yeah, they're just cool because you're playing as the Turtles and you're playing
exactly.
as the Turtles world.
You playing as Turtle, playing as the Turtle world. You just button mash. Like those bosses in those games they're all just like dicks. Like it's just big asshole shit. You know, they break any type of combo and they just run around the stage and just fuck you up. Like it was made so that you would be dying and then you would put more quarters in the machine. You know what I'm saying? And like so, like those are perfect examples of like the way arcade games are. Like, how can we just make this like cool and then like beatable but still like ridiculously hard so that you have to put more money into it? Like that's what an arcade game is, and that's what Sega was used to doing. And unfortunately, you know, Konami went from the Turtles and those X-Men non-fleshed out games into Metal Gear Solid, where there's literally a whole like there's a separate downloadable app for the PS3 that's nothing but story. You know what I'm saying? Like
right.
Like they had like a total switch. Like Sega just did not. They just didn't switch. So yeah, like I get why Sega started out doing their games like that because that was what they were used to. But yeah, when it came to consoles, they just never fleshed it out. And they kept getting passes. Like I don't take this back and I'll tell you, like Virtua Fighter 4, top 10 fighting games of all time. You know what I'm saying? Arguably top 5. You know what I'm saying? And if somebody says it's their number 1, I won't argue. But those characters still don't mean shit in that game. You know what I mean? Like that game was dope because of the fact that they were one of the first to add that like ranking system with the single player gameplay, and they were one of the first to kind of build up that, you know, character customization. Still though, like nothing with those characters in the story. You know what I'm saying? Like they were still very blank, still very bland. So, you know, much different than what we got with like Tekken 4, whereas like Tekken 4 was like damn near like that whole game's like that game's whole edge and atmosphere was based off of like what had progressed in the story. You know what I'm saying? Like Jin is now bad and shit, and you know he's dark, and Hwoarang went to the military. You know what I'm saying? Like, and so like they like explained all of these new character changes with the story. You know, like crazy. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, like that's just what Sega does. And like now that you like when you mention that, like that shit is huge. Like they make shells, like they make concepts. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Well, and that's my point is not to say that they're bad games. Therefore, you know, Knights is a great game. Panzer Dragoon is a great game. Virtua Fighter is great. You know, a lot of them are all great, but they're not competitive. And they just didn't follow, you know, current trends in games because they didn't, you know, because they're just concepts, like, you know, I mean, Knights and Panzer Dragoon are like a combined, you know, like 2 hours of gameplay, you know, like, and Virtua Fighter, you know, it's just like bare bones, like, you know, arcade versus practice, you know, like there's no, I don't even know if it has practice mode, quite honestly, but you know, there's no extra modes, there's no endings or anything like that. It's just like, you know, it does the fighting extremely well, and if you're looking for just a deep fighting game with, you know, all these different characters and different play styles and stuff, then yeah, perfect. You know, if you're looking for the best rail shooter that you can find, you know, Panzer Dragoon, perfect. But if you're looking for something you can get invested in, you know, hell no. I mean, you know what I mean? Right. Like, and that's why I say with Star Fox versus Panzer Dragoon. I mean, Star Fox is not as good of a game as Panzer Dragoon, but it's about, you know, 5 times as long. You know, it has all these different branching paths you can take to the final boss, and it has all these like secret bosses and stuff like that. And you know, just all it has all these cutscenes in between the stages, and the characters going back and forth and arguing with each other, and you know, Wolf O'Donnell, the whole subplot with him being your like arch nemesis and everything, and you know, it just has all this so much extra stuff in it than that something like Panzer Dragoon is just like stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, and there's nothing holding it together, and there's nothing to even you know, it would be like going to a movie and it's just like, you know, a really well shot movie, and you know, has all these like great actors in it, and great dialogue, and all this stuff, but like there's no stakes, there's no drama, there's no like there's no conflict or anything going on in the movie, so it's just kind of like moving from scene to scene without anything to really carry you along, you know.
Kind of like Justice League. I'm just joking.
You know, even Justice League has, you know, the history, the collective history of all these different heroes and stuff in it. But I mean, it's just, you know, Virtua Fighter. I mean, there's no, I mean, you're saying like Ryu and Ken and Scorpion and Sub-Zero, but at least like those characters are like, you can look at them and see that like they're similar enough to where you would be curious about them. Like Scorpion and Sub-Zero, like they look very similar. So you're like, whoa, how come this one has ice powers and this one has, you know, fire powers and a spear and everything? And, you know, why are they fighting each other? And, you know, are they from the same ninja clan or whatever, you know? But, you know, you look at like Jackie and Sarah and you're just like, you know, they could just be anybody. Like, you know, I mean, they're not like...
like they just like, they're literally just American people, you know what I'm saying? Like they're just like, they just like downtown Chicago, you know, like eating pizza and shit. And they're like, you want to go fight a ninja? And they're like, well, it's 1993.
You know, Sega always kind of did that stuff too, where like, you know, when you look at like Nights in like Christmas Nights, and you look at like concept art from those games, and like these like 3D renders that they would do and stuff, and it would always be like, you know, Elliot and Claris, and they'd be like out like, you know, Christmas shopping together, and it would be like this like cool image of them like, you know, skipping through the snow with shopping bag, you know, or something like that, and you'd be like, you know, because like because they don't have any character in the game. Well, I mean, you know, let me back up on that. Let me think about this, because they kind of did. I mean, you kind of had this core conflict with each of them, with, you know, Claris and her you know, audition, and then Elliot and like the, you know, getting bullied at school or whatever, and trying to overcome these things. But like,
of course, but look how it's presented. Like, you select a character, or I don't even think they showed it when you selected him. I think it was like in the intro movie of like,
it's in the intro,
right? And then so you're just kind of like, okay, and then because look, this is what I'm saying. We're thinking about this with very, very, like, first of all, we play those games a lot, and we're looking at it with like, obviously with like, you know, near 30 like brains and shit, right? It was very apparent to me what the hell Sonic was doing in Sonic 2. You know what I'm saying? Like, all the way back, I'm like 3 or 4. I know what the hell is going on. Like, even back then, I was like, you know, well, how come here he likes Sally? Like, why is Sally not in the game? Like, I was very much like in tune with what the hell was going on in like that world. Mm-hmm. I didn't even know what was happening in Nice until like 3 days ago. You know what I'm saying? Like, so like, yeah, like it might be there, but the thing with Sega is like they didn't do a great job with presenting it. You know, like, so yeah, like it's in the intro, but then as you're playing the game, like there's no cutscenes between the stages. Yeah, you know, you just go and then you fight one and then it's over. You know? Yeah,
it's very obscure in Night. I mean, I didn't understand as a kid in Nights that, you know, the character of Nights is like this, you know, vehicle for them to, you know, like fight against their own nightmares and their own fears, you know, and stuff like. And you know, I didn't understand. You know, you start off as the kid, and then they take away all of your ideas, and then you have to go collect them again. And you have to become Knights. You have to become this powerful being. You know, I didn't understand the whole concept of that as a child, because it was, you know, very obscure and buried in this weird outer layer, you know.
Right.
But you know, I mean, it's like I was saying. I mean, they in the same moment as they're exploring these like, I mean, that's like that game, when you think about it, it's like this big, like very like heady, like philosophical thing of
No, it definitely is.
right, of like, trying to well, it's like such a weird concept of like trying to be like in control of your own dreams and facing your fears and everything. Like, it's this very thoughtful game concept, but then at the same time, like, you can't do something like that without rich characters and everything. And then
Right.
just the idea that they had that, like, you could easily have all these cutscenes with these characters, and you could have all these renders with Elliot and Claris, talking to each other and sharing their experiences with knights and everything, and so easily, like, it would take a fan fiction writer 10 minutes to come up with all these different concepts that you could easily explore in cutscenes, or not even cutscenes, just like text on the screen, practically. But
Right.
like they just, for some reason, the game's got to be like this bare bones arcade style where it's like you put the quarter in the machine and just go, and it's just not conducive to a competitive game in that era, so where something like you were saying, something like Streets of Rage, where you can get away with that because it's in 2D, it's the story expectations and stuff like that for games are much more limited back then, and there's this huge leap into the 32-bit era where suddenly, like, we're obligated to tell a bigger story and to connect to the player in a more meaningful way, and Sega does not understand that and does not make any attempt to do it. I mean, and it just continued on. The only games that ever did, like Sonic, I was saying, I mean, Sonic has always done a great job of, as terrible as the games might be, bringing back characters that are familiar to you, and seeing the way that they interact and stuff like that. But every franchise that tried to do that, they just killed. The Panzer Dragoon, dead. Shenmue doesn't belong to them anymore. Like they just don't. It's like they just. And then you look at their brands today, and they have nothing. They have absolutely nothing. They have a bunch of games they publish, and they have Yakuza, which is not. It's just not popular, really, except amongst people that are really into that kind of stuff. And it's just not a mainstream game. And Sonic is mired in this like perpetual state of mediocrity, and every game we're hoping that this is the one that saves the franchise, and it's just like this entity that could have all these other reasons for why it continues to sell versus just the story. But I mean, they just never. I mean, like Crazy Taxi. Like, you could have taken Crazy Taxi. You had all these. They went through the effort of making all these different drivers you can pick, and giving them like these kind of personalities and stuff. And then like they don't do anything with it. Like
Right.
Like fucking BD Joe. Like BD Joe. Oh shit. Like.
Right. He was all in the Dreamcast commercials and shit.
Right.
Right.
Like, and then Crazy Taxi 2. Where is he? He's gone.
Right.
Like, not like
exactly.
Not like, let's make Crazy Taxi 2 like an open world, and let's make it like, let's see how these different drivers interact with each other, and let's give them all special abilities and like, no, let's just start over. Panzer Dragoon. Right. Panzer Dragoon 1, I don't know the story, I don't know the characters, I don't know anything. I know that Panzer Dragoon 2 has a completely different main character, I believe, unless I'm mistaken on that. Correct me if I'm wrong, but and I don't know that character's name either. I just know he's different.
Wait, you said in what game?
In Panzer Dragoon, like the first game in the series.
Oh, yeah.
The protagonist is completely different. There's no sense of like, this is my dragoon, like,
right.
his name is such and such or whatever. And there's this cutscene at the beginning of Panzer Dragoon 2 that tries to give you this like it's like Knights, or it gives you this story, and it gives you like it shows them like I don't even, it was in Japanese, so I didn't understand it obviously, but I could kind of understand. It was like there was some human community that was killing off the dragoons, and like even at like a young age, they have to show this little baby dragoon, and then they just like kill it, and then one guy goes and he rescues one and flies off with it, and it's like, okay, that's enough right there to build a story around, and let's do it, and then it's just stage one, the start.
Right.
There's nothing further after that, and there's not even, I don't think there's even a final cutscene. It's just like credits to start rolling, and so like I don't know anything about these bosses. I don't know why I'm fighting them. It's just like, and it's fun. It's a great game. It's well designed. It's a good concept, but
Right.
there's nothing more there. So why am I gonna play it versus Star Fox? Like go ahead.
they I guess they did try to flesh it out with like by making a whole RPG, but
Right,
then they like were like,
disc
but
RPG.
but we're only gonna release
RPG.
7 copies in the US, so have fun, like.
This is another topic, but I mean, think of the production cost that must have gone into printing, 4 discs per package, and the game was
Right.
in development for 3 years because it started. They started working on that at the same time as Panzer Dragoon 2. Development cost, printing all these discs. And supposedly it's this fantastic game, and people in retrospectives and stuff say it's it's as good as Final Fantasy VII, and it's this fantastic RPG. It's one of the best RPGs ever made at that time, and you don't support it. And then this is another, even with Panzer Dragoon 2, you can go onto Wikipedia and read about the development of that game, and Sega provided, according to that at least, Sega provided no technical support at all to the development of the game. And I'm like, okay, so this is a franchise where the first game comes out, it does well, it sells well, it gets all these great reviews. Let's make a sequel, but you guys just do that on your own. We're not we need first party franchises, but fuck it. Like they just don't. It's just baffling, like what are you doing?
Right. See, yeah, like it, well, okay, so, okay, look, now, I was reading something, right? And, I want to, I want to take a look at Burning Rangers, okay?
Mm.
Now, I have here character profiles from Burning Rangers.
Oh God.
They're from Sega Saturn magazine, and I'm just gonna read them, and then I want you to, say how interesting or great they are. So of course we have 5 Rangers here, right? Now these profiles I think were like probably translated by some in-house, likely Japanese person, because the English is not the best. I mean, it's not like great, but it's not also not the best. I mean, it's not terrible, but it's just like, yeah. So I'm just gonna read them verbatim as apparently they were printed in Sega Saturn magazine. Okay. So the first one I think is the only one that is even moderately interesting, and it's because of not because of a very good reason. But we have Chris Parton, female, age 24, the leader of the Burning Rangers team and their navigator. She's smart and never overlooks a mistake. When she was 13, her father, a previous generation Burning Ranger, was killed in a failed rescue mission. Right.
Okay.
Now, the only thing that makes her interesting is the fact that it's like, what, 1997, and she's the leader or something, right? Like,
Right.
like
Right.
terrible, but like that's kind of cool. And so yeah, let's go to lead Phoenix here, male, 22, a cool character, right? A cool character with a passion for his work. His conduct reflects the fact that he values a life. However, he also values his own life and won't risk it on reckless rescues. This Ace Ranger shooting is top class.
It doesn't even like jive with his like character in game. He's like this arrogant, like kind of
Right.
like like looking down on the player as like this, you know, inferior ranger. You know, like that's his character. He's not like, I don't know. That's
Right.
not like selfish. He's just like, I'm better than you. You know, like
Right. And it's just like, you know, he values life and he won't risk it being reckless. Like, oh,
no,
you know what I mean?
it
Like,
never happens. He's absolutely ready to risk his life. Yeah, why would he be a burning ranger?
exactly, right? Like, come on. You know, okay, here we have Tillis. When she was just a child, Tillis lost both of her parents in a disaster. She's a kind-hearted girl who never ignores a person in need, but because she's very cute, it's difficult for those close to her to let go of her.
Okay, irrelevant.
Right? Yeah, like this is the cute one, you know. Oh, and this one is great, you know, because as always. So,
big landman.
how did you know? How did you know? Big landman, male, 35,
big black man.
right? Basically, a big black motherfucker. You know, it's the same guy from Virtua Fighter. You know. So, he was raised in the Africa.
The Africa. Okay.
I'm reading it verbatim. He was
raised in Africa? He's like American.
Look, he was raised in the Africa and dearly loves plants and animals. He doesn't change his mind once he's decided to do something, and he'll always carry it out to the very end. He wants to protect all living things.
What?
Exactly. And then we have I'll say Sho Amabane, you know, because that's what we used to say. It should be Amabane now that I'm looking at it, but you know, I'm not that guy. So male, 21. He's always in good spirits, but a little naive. He's bold and daring.
What?
Right? I thought he was a smart one, wasn't he?
Right.
Yeah, he's bold and daring, and his behavior constantly surprises all around him. When he was 10 years old, he would have lost his life if he hadn't been saved by the Burning Rangers.
Ah, that's totally different. Because he's just like he's kind of generic, but he's just like, I don't know. He's just like a good student or something, you know. Like that's how I always saw him.
Right.
He's just like he just wants to, you know, do a good job. Like there's nothing really more to. I don't see him as being like reckless and crazy or anything.
Right. His bold and daring behavior. So yeah, it's just like, you know, like first of all, like they all sound boring as hell, you know.
They all sound like this. Like if you were like to look through a list of like character archetypes or stereotypes, like, you know, like,
right,
this one can go here, this one can go here, like that's what it sounds like.
Right, like my parents are dead, so I'm gonna, you know, do what they did in the past. Like oh my god.
Well, this really makes me think of Sonic, because this always bothered me even as a kid, when I would read like the manuals for Sonic games when they started, you know, like a Sonic Adventure and everything. Because there would always be some character profile in there, and it'd be like Sonic is, you know, he values freedom, and he's like the wind, and he, you know, he can't be, you know, but he has a short temper and everything. And I'd always be like, like, not really. At least,
right.
You know, at least the way he's presented in the game. Like, I've never seen Sonic, which I would like to see. I would like to see Sonic like get really mad, you know,
right.
and have like a short temper, and like maybe he does something that he's like not, you know, that he like regrets later or something, you know, or he, out of anger, he, you know, does something, you know, or really hurts somebody or something. Like that would be really interesting to see, and something you could easily play with. But like,
right.
It's just something that's written in the manual. Like there's no translation of that into the game. Like he's just like a dude, you know, in the game. Like he's just like, hey, let's go and have fun, you know. Like I never have gotten the thing that's interesting is like it struck me back then as like a 10-year-old, you know, like reading the manual in Sonic Adventure and being like, you know, I don't think of Sonic like that, you know.
Right.
Like I never thought of him as being like, oh, you know, this like freedom lover, and it may be on like the TV show or something. But even then, he was just kind of like an idiot who was really fast, you know.
Right. See that. Yeah, like that. That's kind of wild, you know.
It's almost like the characterization and the all of that fleshing out of their story and stuff is like completely separate from the game. It's just like something that they like contracted out, you know, like, oh, write the
Right.
manual, you know, and so like whoever's writing the manual is like, well, I got to put stuff in it, you know, and like, and they did all that work to try to flesh the character out, but it's not represented in the game at all.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it's and it's just so bad because then like you take games like Tekken, for example, and people will even like talk junk about like Tekken character stories, but like they're a million times better than any of this stuff, and I mean, like, on one end of the spectrum, I think like with a lot of this stuff that you get with Japanese characters, I think like, so like, for example, like there's things like they always will put like the blood type in there, right? And that just never translated well. Like looking back, honestly, like looking back, if I was like in charge of like localization in any one of these companies in the 90s, I would have taken that like blood type thing and I would have just been like, okay, just give all of these characters birthdays, and then because usually they already have them, and then I would have just replaced that with like their zodiac. Because that's kind of more like how Japanese people look at it. Like the blood types are like personality types for them.
Oh, okay.
Right? And so like,
yeah,
okay, so
I always thought that was weird,
right?
That they would be like 00 negative, for like,
right. Exactly. So it's like, like you see it, and you're just like, well, what does this have to do with anything,
Yeah.
So I think maybe some of the things that they were trying to add to the characters just didn't translate well. And then on top of that too, like, so for instance, like like, obviously, like, we have archetypes, right? So like in the same way that like if you just are like, this guy's a ninja, and then like you put him in America in the 90s, like he's like automatically cool, and that automatically gives him like a cool story and shit, right? To a Japanese person, they're just like, this is just some like strange, obscure historical thing, like this isn't cool, and they did that too, like with like you look at like a lot of the characters, and especially like in the Saturn games, like they were just like white or black people, and like to them it was like, oh my god, like white blonde hair man from Chicago, but like to us, like, we're like
mystical thing, yeah,
right, like that's literally my neighbor, what I mean? Like Jackie Bryant lives next door to me. It's nothing. So I think that they just didn't do a good job with that. Like that didn't translate well either. And then it's like, it's just so crazy because then you look at somebody like Solid Snake, right? Like, he's so like ridiculous, like, yeah, he's just like a white dude, but like just like the way with Snake, honestly, a lot of it is just the things that are like around him, and you kind of build his character by like what's around him as opposed to his backstory. But like it's just so, that like Japanese take on like the West, that can work so well sometimes, but Sega just never quite did it good. They relied so heavily on like shallow stereotypes and archetypes.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think about Snake. Like, Snake doesn't really, I mean, he has some backstory, but a lot of it's just kind of mysterious and very tangled up, in Big Boss and cloning and all this, but like he still has this, like, he's this loner, but then he, struggles with getting attached to certain people, and he doesn't like violence and war, and he thinks it's terrible, and yet he's always somehow drawn to it, and like he has this like extremely powerful and dramatic personality and character that is like so easy to identify with and get involved with, in spite of having very unclear origins and like really not even origins that you can like identify with. I mean, I can't identify with being like this like genetically modified like super soldier based off of the DNA of some former soldier or what, like it's completely ridiculous and like super anime and everything, but like at his core he is just like this very human character, and that's and it just, Sega doesn't have anything nearly as deep as that. Like there's just not
not at all. Even like it's funny that you mentioned both. I think it's funny that you mentioned both Shenmue and Yakuza, because See, those characters, I think, like Ryu and then
Ryo.
Kazuma, respectively. Yeah, shit, Ryo and Kazuma, respectively. I mean, Kazuma is pretty like fleshed out. It's just one of those things where like, yeah, like if you're not like a fan of the series and you know, he's just not big. But both of those guys like are just Japanese men. Like they're not really that special. But you get to like pick up on them through like their daily life, like literally like through their daily life. And yeah, so like with Ryo, it's like he's just like a Japanese dude, like nothing else. Like his father gets killed.
He's a good boy,
right? But then it's like you just start to relate to him because it's like, oh, like I've been to the arcade with him, you know what I mean? Like I've been to work with him, you know, like I talked to the Jamaican hot dog truck dude with him, you know what I mean? Like that's where you like start to like build up those characters. So like you really build this kind of like, regardless of if they're interesting or not, because yeah, Snake, like out of the context, like I probably wouldn't want to hang out with Snake. Like he's probably boring as shit, you know what I'm saying? And like he always says this corny ass shit, you know, and like makes these jokes, you know, and it's just like, Snake, you're like a fucking weirdo, you know what I'm saying? But like you build up, you know, that relationship with him through like the stuff you do with him, and that's like how Ryo and Kazuma are. But yeah, well, like, you know, I mean, one is for
a little bit. I mean, I think Ryo, for me, I think is, I mean, yeah, it is like his base character is just like, he's just like a, you know, a good-natured like Japanese man, you know, but like he does have, I mean, he like, you know, the idea of someone who's just like well behaved and you know, kind of just like a normal guy, you know, going to school, or he just graduated high school and he's gonna apply to colleges and all this stuff, and then this terrible thing happens and all of a sudden, you know, he's completely consumed with like getting revenge, and which is like very out of character for him, seemingly, you know, with his background and everything, and you get that with, you know, Nozomi being like, no, just apply to a school, and you know, like just mourn your father and don't you know, worry about like trying to get revenge, and like just move on. And he's like, he can't move on. This is like consuming his entire life, and like you know, like he has like I think a really interesting character actually, and that's which is like just even more maddening because like that game, you know, Shenmue was a game that I was so like invested in, and like Shenmue 2, like when that came out, I remember playing Shenmue 2 like when I first got it on Xbox, and like you know, we came home, like I just like went and got it with my dad or whatever. We came home and I'd been playing it for like an hour or something like that, and then I was like talking about it with him, and he was like, oh, you seem real happy right now. And I was like, yeah, I am really happy because I'm playing this game that I was like so hyped to play, and I wanted to see what happened next and everything, and I was so invested in that character in the world and everything. And then like Sega just fucking throws it away. Yeah, it's just fucking gone for 15 fucking years, you know? And it's like,
I mean, you know, that's lit. I mean, like that's what they do to you. You know, that's
what they do to you.
You know, I mean, it's
Streets of Rage. You fucking love Streets of Rage, right? You know,
right?
It's gone. It's exactly. Like Sega Bass Fishing. It's gone. You know,
it's right. Shit, Sega Bass Fishing is. You know what I'm saying? It's motherfucking gone. You know, yeah, like everything that they've done, and it's just So, and I think like that, because I think that's just like a fundamental part of Sega. Like, I think that they were never really invested in trying to like build up these long-standing, long franchises that people play for years and got so invested in these characters. I think they were always just trying to make like, what's like the next hot thing, you know?
Yeah.
Because I mean, yeah, like the Saturn. I mean, both the Saturn and the Dreamcast. Like, I mean, there's like the only consistent factor in both consoles is, I mean, in all three consoles, is Sonic.
Yeah. And, you know. And with the Saturn, it's barely so, but still.
Right. You know what I'm saying? So it just, you know.
You know, it might be interesting to go back and look at, like, you know, Master System even, and see, like, what, you know, see the, like, the differences therein, you know?
Right. Well, I mean, they had a whole different mascot back then.
Yeah.
that they again just like fucked off. You know,
Yeah,
they were
and
like,
I was
well,
thinking about that too, like Space Harrier, Outrun, like just gone. You know, like that was like the
yeah,
first
like,
the Alex the Kid, like, you know, those are just those were the first to bite the dust, you know.
right. Yeah, like literally, like that's all Sega. Like they just have franchises that like bite the dust. Like literally, like can we even come up with 5 Sega franchises outside of Sonic that have had a place in every generation?
No. Like I don't even have to think about it. I mean, the better question would be like, you know, can you think of 5 that lasted even like more than 2 generations,
Right.
or 2 at least?
Well, actually, yeah, just
Yeah, I mean, I guess you could have
Sonic.
Golden Axe, Shinobi.
And those, you know, and those are so hard to say. Well, okay, Shinobi actually is probably like Shinobi is like the only one that's like the truth.
Hmm.
Golden Axe, because like they made a bullshit ass game on the PS3, like just like total utter like not give a fuck about bullshit. Like
Uh,
Shinobi and Nightshade weren't like bad games. They just weren't as good as Ninja Gaiden, but they still had like a unique feel and like they were fun and shit. That Golden Axe Beast Rider is just ass.
mhm. Well,
You
even
know
the
what I'm
Data
saying?
Golden Axe, the Duel on Saturn, which I had never fucking played, so I don't know anything about it. And yeah,
Well, yeah,
Shinobi X and all that.
but then like Golden Axe was gone that whole next generation.
Hmm.
You know. So yeah, it's man. You know.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, like, because beyond that, I mean, Jet Set Radio, it was just one generation.
Just one.
Just one. Yeah, Crazy Taxi, it was just one generation. Um, like, what else?
Panzer Dragoon. Well, Panzer Dragoon made it to 2.
It made it to 2, and that's god damn. That's franchise too. Like, it's such a wasted opportunity for them. I mean, like that franchise,
100%.
it could have been like something that turned into like Sega's Final Fantasy, because they didn't give a fuck about Shining Force, obviously, and Fantasy Star had become. I guess that's another one. Fantasy Star had become this like, you know, online thing. You know, like, and even that, like, you know, make it some fucking MMO shit. You know, make it Final
Right.
Fantasy 11. You know, or 14. Like, make it something big. But Panzer Dragoon, like, it was this like state of the art graphics game. You know, looked great on this 32-bit console. I mean, there's like the game Panzer Dragoon 2 looks better than Star Fox 64, and it's on a 32-bit console versus a 64-bit console. You know,
Right.
and Panzer Dragoon Orta looks great even today. I mean, that game looks amazing, and it's on the original Xbox. Like, it's on par with like Ninja Gaiden for like graphics and stuff.
Right.
And the music in all those games is fantastic, you know. But it could have turned into this franchise that had RPG elements. You know, could have been like an open world game. It could have been a third person shooter. It could have been all this different stuff. But just no, just throw it away. You know, Jet Set Radio has this awesome vibe to it, and it has all this, you know, like futuristic Japanese stuff, and, you know, this great music. But even that, I mean, like, the characters are just blank slates. So, you know, I couldn't tell you anything about Gum or Beat or, you know, any of those characters. I don't know anything about them, you know, and it's just what they do.
Now that, you know, that definitely is true. You know, like, yeah, even in those games, yeah, like the characters are just
they're just like
just
different, like
things.
Yeah, they're just different, like visual thing. You know, like, it's just, do I want to pick, you know, the goth girl, or do I want to pick the you know, the Japanese kid, or I want to pick the big black man with the boom box on his shoulder? You know, like, they're just like avatars, you know.
Yeah, that's actually, yeah, like a great way to put it. They're just avatars. And I mean, and then, you know, and when it's with a series like that, you know, they could have, they still could have like kept that going. I think, you know, like because you know, I think some series like, you know, will work that way, but just another one that they just didn't continue. Because you know, I think you know, even of course like building characters is like a great way to do it, but kind of like I said, like with Streets of Rage, it's kind of like that game was built up not so much by the characters themselves, but by like just like the world and like the music and how that all like, you know, like it all just fit really well. You know what I'm saying?
More aesthetic, yeah.
Exactly. So you could build the world that way, but say like they don't even do that, you know, with a lot of their games now. So
yeah, because they don't have the music anymore, really. Like that was Sega always had like good music, and then famously, of course, with the Sonic franchise, although many will argue, you know, Crush 40 fucking sucks, and
Crush 40 sucks. Come argue.
People, you know what I'm saying? Yeah, come argue. Yeah, you know, I mean, that shit's, I mean, the only way, you know, I'm not even gonna say that because I was gonna say like as a child, you know, you might grow this like nostalgic attachment to like live and learn or whatever, but you got to be really fucking young because I mean we were, you know, like what, like 12 or whatever when that shit was coming out, and it was shitty back then.
Yeah, that shit was boo boo. It was just, yeah, like I even with Sonic Adventure 1, like I just remember kind of feeling like, wow, like they put like super like heavy rock music in this, you know what I mean? Like it even felt like weird then. And it's just like, I mean, yeah, I didn't even really realize until recently that like Jun Senoue is like in Crush 40.
Yeah.
You know, so it's just like he just made a whole shitty ass band to
make Sonic tracks,
to make this music. This is ridiculous.
And yet there was this distinction between the stage music and the character themes, which you know, it's just baffling. I mean, why would you, these like very on the nose lyrically, musically just mediocre, extremely like limited appeal genre tracks, like why would you do that? I mean, like a game like Streets of Rage 2, like the music is just kind of universal, you know, like it's just like it's just like good, you know, like a good kind of like electronic vibe to it with, you know, like, I mean, not 100% electronic, but I mean certainly parts of it.
It's just like house, like dope ass house.
Well, yeah, it's just like good like melodies and good like just like a good vibe and good beats and stuff, you know, which is like that appeals to, you know, 99% of people. I mean, especially if you're playing a video game, it's just like it keeps you company really good, and it kind of like drives the action on screen and kind of sets the mood of each stage, you know. So even if you're not a house fan, even if you're not an electronic fan or whatever, or hip hop or anything, like you can still get behind the way that it sets the tone for each stage and everything. And Sonic music was always like that, you know, even if you weren't into that kind of music or whatever, you know, these like Michael Jackson-esque kind of backing tracks, like, you know, it just like Ice Cap just goes perfectly with that stage, you know. You don't have to even think about how it's, you know, it sounds a lot like Who Is It, or, you know, like it's just not necessary. And the idea that you would replace all that with these like extremely limited tracks where it's like, oh, you know, Knuckles likes rap music and Sonic likes, you know, like surfer rock, and, you know, like it's just, it's
yeah, so, like it was so, because like they just took these characters who just, you know, like, yeah, like they just like straight like racialized them, you know what I mean? Like Sonic just became like a California white boy, you know what I mean? Like Knuckles was just like this New York black dude. Like it was ridiculous. Like Mario and Luigi are not racialized at all. Like it's funny watching like that. Like, did you ever watch the Mario Bros Super Show?
Yeah.
Remember how they were like these like Brooklyn Italian like plumbers and shit? Like, like that's not how Luigi and Mario are for real. You know what I mean? But like that's just how they were on the show. You know, hey Mario, you know, like
forget about it, Mario.
right? Like come on, you know. But like, you know, and that was just, you know, that obviously was not. That was probably like one of those times when Nintendo was like, we'll let them get the license and we'll just sit here and we'll just hope it brings us money, you know, but we'll bounce back from this, you know. Like, yeah, like, but Sega did that shit for real. You know what I mean? Like, Sega really like made Knuckles into a black motherfucker, you know, like,
but only when convenient. I mean, you know, only again, there's this detachment because, you know, oh, Knuckles likes rap music and Knuckles, you know, has, you know, this kind of like hip urban style to him. But then his in-game character is nothing like that, you know, like
right.
He's just like a generic guy, you know, like there's no
exactly.
There's just nothing there. And then they dispensed even with the urban kind of feel with him, you know, like, and that's just, and so I don't know if this is just Japanese translation problems versus, because they always, it's sort of like with, you know, I guess that was a thing back in the day where, you know, you look at Street Fighter and it was like, you know, we have to call Vega Bison and we have to call Bison Balrog and all, you know, like for some reason, because that will appeal more to the American audience or avoid, you know, this issue or that issue. And the same with the Sonic story. The Sonic story for the North American version or just the Western version in general, Sonic is totally different from the Japanese version. And
is it?
Yeah. Like the whole thing with like the freedom fighters and like that's just made like that's all American. There's no.
Oh, you talk. Oh, okay, yeah. You talk about like the comic stuff. Yeah, I know that stuff.
Well,
yeah.
even the games. I think if you read the instruction book to Sonic 2, like I think the story is just different from the Japanese version in like significant ways. I'm pretty sure, and you know, so I don't know if it's just like we did all this stuff and now we're trying to like reconcile them somehow, but like they don't fit, you know, with what's on screen.
Right. So yeah, like that, because you know, and it was just like, I mean, I remember like when Knuckles first came out, and I remember like on the US box art how he was like hiding in the bush. Like, do you remember that?
Yeah, he's very mysterious.
Yeah, like, and so like he had this like hip hop like music, but again, like that music, it wasn't just like, because like Carnival Night is like just as much as like hip hopish or like many of those other songs, you know, as his song is, you know, like you know, Hydro City's all like jazzy and whatnot. So like it still didn't like, it just kind of felt like a different kind of this music. It didn't feel like totally out of place, you know, whereas like you know, when you got like Live and Learn playing, and then you got, you know, Amy coming up with her, you know, Britney Spears bullshit, and then you got Big the Cat is like literally just like a 42-year-old like white fisherman from, you know, Ohio. You know, it's just like
special needs.
Right. like it was just crazy like how they just like try to like racialize all of them so much. Whereas yeah, like with, you know, yeah, I mean like it's just not. Yeah, like Falco, for example, is like edgy and like kind of like snippy, but like what is he? Like is he like you know what I mean? Like you can't like, he's just Falco, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, like he's loyal at the end of the day, but he's gonna give you a hard time and he's gonna question all of Fox's decisions and, you know, talk shit about him, and you know, but at the end of the day he's on the team, you know.
Right. Yeah, like it's just I really just don't get, you know, where, and I mean, yeah, like, you know, are we saying that, you know, Nintendo always does it right? I mean, yeah, sort of, kind of, yeah, you know, a little bit. But I mean, yeah, I guess Sega could have done it in a different way, but you know,
well,
I mean, because even
I think it just boils down. I mean, they just don't have any direction with their company. They've just been lost since the Genesis. You know,
right?
Like they just haven't. There's been this like conflict between Sega of America and Sega of Japan that just never has been reconciled, and like they just don't know where to go. Like I mean, famously, you can go back to Sonic Extreme. with the whole story behind the development of that game, where they had this idea, and then Sega of Japan comes and looks to see their demo, and they say, no, you can't do it this way, you have to do it this other way. And so they try to use the Knights engine to remake everything that they already did. And then Yuji Naka finds out that they're using his engine, and he says, no, you can't use my engine because you didn't ask it, and,
Right.
and so they're refused. They can't use that engine anymore. So they have to start a whole new, start from scratch for a third time. And then they missed their deadline, and then the Saturn's dead anyway, and the game is canceled, and there's no main series Sonic game on the Saturn, because there's this weird divide between what Sega Japan wants to do and what Sega of America wants to do. And
Right.
it just has never really been repaired. And I mean, just the Dreamcast is just like a perfect example of that, where it's like, there's no real third party stuff. I mean, I guess there was more on the Dreamcast than on the Saturn, but like they didn't get the big stuff, and they couldn't have even done it. They couldn't have had a Grand Theft Auto port on the Dreamcast. They couldn't have had
a Grand Theft Auto 3 port, because they definitely had Grand Theft Auto 2.
Oh yeah. They were still they were always a step behind. They were always trying to compete with Dreamcast is a better competitor to like the 64 than it is to like the PlayStation 2.
Right.
Like, yeah, they just lost, just completely lost.
Yeah, like it.
I don't know if it's just too many voices in the same room, or what, or they don't, like sometimes they want to stand on these like laurels of like, oh, this is what we do arcade ports. And then other times they want to be like, oh, we're going to try to have more mass appeal. And other times it's like, we want to appeal to our core fans and bring back these franchises. And it's just like it changes every day.
Right. No, it definitely does. That's why, yeah, I'm really I really want to see like what is really going to happen for real with Sega Forever. Like, is this just going to be the future of Sega? Like, we make our old games into cell phone games, like. Like, okay,
we re-release our old games 100 times over. That's what Sega is about,
basically. So yeah, I don't know. Well, we'll see.
All right. Well, you got anything else to add to this? This was a really good discussion, I feel like.
No, it definitely was. And it was like a really good point. And it just, it like, I'm just like, yeah, like we're just like straight up Sega theorists now. Like it's over. Like, there's no coming back. Yeah. Like, but it's just real. Like, yeah, they make shells,
They always have. They always will.
It's crazy.
And it was excusable at one, well, not even excusable. I mean, that's just how it was, in the 16-bit era and before that.
Right.
But they didn't modernize, and they didn't make any attempt to well, they made some attempts. Some, Yu Suzuki and others made some attempt at that, but they didn't. Sega, the organization, did not see fit to support or continue those.
Right. See, yeah, exactly. And then it just, yeah, shit.
All right. Well, I think we'll call it good there. And yeah, this has been Queasy Crayfish and Mars Vindicator. Hyper Evo. I don't know if you want to shout out Hyper Evo.
Hyper Evo. They know what the deal is.
Yeah, we'll see you next time.
See you.